Okay, all good.
Also, I'll call the meeting to order. If we could have roll call. Matt, do you do that usually, or?
Um, yeah, I think.
All right.
Um,
You'll have a list.
no, Kelly, you're here.
I am, thank you.
Dennis.
Here.
All right. Barry, or David Allen,
Here.
Rob Baranek.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm here. Am I missing anybody?
I'm here as well, Mikhail Kilpula.
Oh, I'm sorry. How you doing, Mikhail?
Have you joined the board?
No, I'm with Dennis. I'm the city
Oh,
engineer.
okay. All right. Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Gotcha. I think is that everybody?
I think it is. Okay,
All
great.
right. That was real official. Yeah.
So we have an agenda. It's pretty straightforward today. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion, anything to add? Oh, I better keep track of that. That was because Sherry's not here. Rob.
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Oh, great. All right.
I'm
Good.
here. Yeah. And I apologize for being late. I've been trying to get in. I don't know if Matt got in either.
All right. Yeah.
I'm here.
He's here. So all in favor of the agenda, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Hi.
All opposed? That passes. And then we also, oh, well, I guess we'll turn it over to Sherry at this point for election of officers.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. And I apologize for being late. Trying out a new device and I'm not very techy. So anyway, yes, we will move on to the election of officers. And in the past, I've always had to bring paper ballots just in case there was a runoff, as if we've never really had that happen, but it'd be a little difficult today. But at this point, we will ask for a motion or a nomination for the office of chair. Are there any nominations?
I nominate David.
Okay. And we have support for that?
Second.
Thank you. I don't know that we need to vote on them all individually. I think we could move on to the vice chair position. Are there nominations for the position of vice chair?
Can we ask for somebody who's, is there already a vice chair or is there somebody interested in doing it?
There is not currently a vice chair.
Okay, is there anybody interested in doing it?
What does the vice chair do? Run the meeting if you're not there?
Mostly, yeah.
Yes.
Rob would be really good at that.
Rob, would you be willing to do it?
I'm willing to be the vice chair. Yeah.
Well, then I nominate Rob to be vice chair.
Second.
Get you, man.
Okay. I think you did last time. And then we have the office of secretary, which Matt has held for us over the past year. Is there a motion for the position of secretary?
I move that Matt continue as secretary.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Would anyone want to propose approval of the slate of officers as put forward?
I propose we approve the slate of officers put forward.
Okay. And a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, congratulations, everyone. So I am pleased to turn it back over to David.
Thanks, Sherry. Sherry, how many members are we down right now? How many do we need to fill?
We are down 2.
Two, okay, all right.
Mhm.
Is that a topic for another time? Or have we identified people? Are we working on this?
We work at it really all the time. The city typically puts, they have it on the website, and they also announce it at a fair amount of the meetings, if not all of them. So
Staff isn't really
the
supposed to
best-
recruit.
Huh?
Staff isn't really supposed to recruit for boards. If you guys have anybody in mind that you'd like, just have them apply.
I might be able to think of a few names at least.
Great. Good. Okay. Anything else about the slots that are open? Okay. We also next have the meeting schedule, which was in the packets. So we have it's going to continue to be the third Thursdays of the month, and you can see the dates. I don't know if anybody has anything to add or say about that. All right. Good. Next, we have the consent agenda, which is only the approval of the minutes from December 17th.
Just one quick note,
If you had a chance to look those over.
David, I'm
looking
sorry,
for
just
a-
one note, I think, and maybe Sean or Chair can correct me, I think you have to adopt the meeting schedule.
Yes.
Oh,
we do.
okay, good. So I'm looking for a motion to adopt this meeting schedule.
Moved.
And looking for a second.
Second.
Second, Dennis.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. All right, that passes, so that's adopted. Thanks, Mac. So next is the consent agenda, which is the approval of the meetings from December 17th. Looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda. That was Matt. Good, thank you. Looking for a second. Dennis, thank you. Any discussion, any additions, any problems that anybody saw? Okay, all in favor of adopting the minutes under the consent agenda, say yes. Yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. All right, that passes. Next, we have the treasurer's report. Mary?
Good morning, everyone. So I prepared the financial review and the statements for the month of December. This is all the activity for those first 3 months. Biggest mover is during the month of December on December 1st, we recognize the winter tax revenues. These are all local. So the captures totaled $226,323.35, and you can see the breakdown of those captures between Duke Life Point, 231, Liberty Way, Cliffsdale, and Founders Landing. This is the bulk of the revenues that we're going to receive now for until July 1, when we can recognize 25% of the summer tax revenue. Of note, these reports are prepared before we made the adjustments that were approved at the December Board of Review. The biggest adjustment that the Brownfield is going to see there is that we recognized this year that the personal property of the DLP parcel was being, the millages that were applied to that were if it were a commercial facility tax, which is about half of the millage, and this was intended to be an ad valorem. So once those adjustments are made, we're going to see, I'm looking at about another $1 million in revenues that's going to be coming in to the DLP capture this year yet. Final note on DLP, I'm still waiting for a proper address in order to mail out the check for the eligible expenditure reimbursement that we approved at last month's meeting. So a lot
I'll
of
get back
activity.
to you on that, Mary.
Okay, great, thank you. So a lot of activity going on in revenues, but this should pretty much slow down now that we're going to be looking at expenditures for the rest of the year. Month of December is pretty quiet. We pretty much just had administrative services, about $4,641. So all in all, our revenues so far exceed our expenditures for the fiscal year by 1.18 million. And we kind of carry that forward into our balance sheet, and total fund balance sits now at about 6.2 million. 2.1 of that is reserved for bond related activities. We have that 2.7 million that we're waiting to pay out to DLP, which leaves 1.39 million available for the expenditures for the rest of the fiscal year. And you can see that breakdown among the projects on your lead sheet. So that's about all I've got today for the treasurer's report. Any questions?
Okay, great. Thanks, Mary. Looking for a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Rob, thank you. And looking for a second. Matt, thank you. All in favor, say yes. Yes. All
Yes.
opposed, same sign. That passes. Thanks. Next, we have opportunity for public comment, which cannot exceed 5 minutes per person. Do we have anybody in the queue today? Nobody in the queue? Okay.
Oh.
All right, great. In that case, we're to announcements by the chair. I just wanted to say one thing, and that was to Sherry and Dennis Smith, that I really appreciated seeing the preliminary materials on the affordable housing group. That was really interesting and useful. I learned some things that I didn't know, some of the data and facts, and as well as the progress. So I really appreciated that, and looking forward to seeing that, come to fruition. So thanks for that.
Welcome.
I have no other announcements. So we're ready for the report from the executive director, Sherry.
Okay. It's been like every other month, emails and phone calls primarily on a couple of, a potential project related to housing, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. And another inquiry from an individual on a potential project. So hasn't been anything too different from what the usual month is like.
Okay. Any questions for Sherry? All right. So we're moving right along. We're up to project updates. We have 6 here. I don't know if there's no one online, right, from any of the projects. I don't think there is. So Mac, I don't know if you have any updates on any of these. You might just run through them.
Yeah, I can provide a quick update. I did speak with Barry yesterday, and on Founders Landing for the 2 Marquette Place. They're actually having precast concrete delivered to the site. The weather has, while not good for snowmobilers, has been good for construction. So they're moving along, and everything is working well in their construction schedule. So they're on schedule and no major hiccups or issues. So they're continuing to proceed in that project as well. We've had some conversations. We are awaiting the eligible activity payments from Fairfield. They're going to be providing their documentation for expenses and be submitting those. So those will be coming up soon. We hope, we anticipate. And as well for the townhouses, one item to kind of say, to let you know that the geotechnical report identified the need for special foundations at the townhouses. They're going to put in geopiers. They were hoping, because the bedrock is a little bit higher, that they might not need them, but the geotech report needed them. They're going to have some additional expenses. They're going to make a request soon for consideration of additional expenses. And as you'll see later in the agenda, we're about used up for the founders budget allocation. I think we've talked about this, that the approach there for founders is to have them submit their request. The board can document that they are eligible activities, can decide whether to approve those or not. And then depending on how all the expenses come out in a couple of years with the pier and with the rest of Marquette Place, there may be available funding within the existing budget, Or the other option would be to amend the Brownfield plan to increase local tax capture only for those additional expenses. So that's a issue. You might want to think a little bit about that. We can talk about it, but that's going to kind of be coming in, and we can talk a little bit more in the request from the city for some infrastructure about how that process may work. So, any questions on founders? Okay, DLP, as Mary mentioned, we're trying to give them money. We're trying, so that check should go out soon. In addition, we kind of laid out a process to look at the Beacon House eligible expenditures. I believe that those will be somewhere in the range of $450,000. We've talked about there is some budget on the environmental side for DLP. And they're working through the process. I laid out kind of a process that Beacon House needs to put together what their request is, work through the process with DLP to figure out any financial arrangements or what their cooperation is and how that may play. And then we can come back and amend the Brownfield plan if necessary, and amend all the agreements if necessary to provide some reimbursement for Beacon House. As Mary said, there's some additional dollars coming in from DLP. The anticipated revenue was about twice as much as what we conservatively estimated in the Brownfield plan. So there's quite a bit of revenues to absorb some additional costs from Beacon House and support their project. It's just a matter of how we make those arrangements that will be coming in probably next month, I would anticipate, for your consideration. So, any questions on DLP? No report for Liberty Way, no report for 231. Customs House, the closing has occurred on the parcel of property, so that very important step has been made. We haven't had much contact with the folks, but we'll follow up with them kind of on their development timeline and their activities. There some conversations about how the infrastructure fits that we'll continue to discuss with them and how we make that happen as well, the bike path specifically. So, with respect to UP State Bank, we've had a wonderful opportunity to interface with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation on that. Sean and folks at the city have provided kind of great leadership. As you know, an important part of that is the infrastructure improvements that are there. That's a majority of the ask for MEDC. For some reason, they have been reluctant to provide the support for the project. We put together a request for them to reconsider that. We have not heard back. Sean, I think you said that was the 23rd that was sent in, or December. And so we discussed that. There also, in the context of that, is a major activity that's happening under MEDC to develop some Brownfield TIF guidelines. They've sought input from municipalities, from developers, and from practitioners like me, and they've gotten quite a bit of blowback about their process. And so we've been trying to engage and figure that process out, make it a little bit easier for smaller projects to walk through. The same process is engaged if you have a $1 million investment and $200,000 worth of eligible activities, as you do for a $20 million project and $2.1 million worth of eligible activities. So got a lot of discussion there. I think that hopefully there'll be some changes which will open up the opportunity for UP State Bank. We're not in a hurry necessarily for that. The infrastructure won't go in right away. And so we're kind of waiting patiently, hopefully, for that process to flow through and may be able to get finally approval for those activities.
And Mac, you've been at this kind of work for a long time. Do you have, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but on two issues, what is your sense of first of all, the odds that they may actually reconsider on this particular project, and how much flexibility do you see in the agency itself? Do you think that they are likely or unlikely to actually change their approach more generally? Do you have a sense on either of those?
Yeah, I think, and we're working pretty hard to try and affect that change. I think I have some optimism with respect to the UP State Bank. Because again, we sort of clarified at the end, and I'm not sure they realized this. We tried to outline it, but most of it's public infrastructure.
Right.
280,000 is public infrastructure and 100,000 for demo. And I think we threw 15,000 in for relocation of active utilities. So most all of it is public infrastructure, and it still clicks all the boxes. I just don't quite understand. It's in an opportunity zone, financial services, but I'm hopeful, and I think optimistic that we'll be able to reach some resolution on the UP State Bank.
And we have that same issue locally that people have. I don't think people realize what the purpose of the Brownfield part of it was, and I think we're starting to get the word out on that. But there's been some head scratching here locally too, like why are you doing the Burger King? And it's the same.
Yeah. Yep. That project, it was. It was. They do have they have environmental issues on that. They have to install a vapor mitigation system, and we've submitted, a fairly extensive system that goes underneath to make sure that environmental vapors are not infiltrating into the building. That is a whole separate process. That's kind of, if you need it, you can demonstrate it, and here's the cost of reasonable, it's approved on the Eagle side. MEDC, I don't want to use all these pejorative terms, but they're trying to engineer development. And I think that they're, focused on downtowns, focused on all of these kinds of issues, redevelopment ready, all the folks, all the items that are important, but they become exclusive in this situation. This is a small project. Let's move forward. We had a heck of a time getting Liberty Way approved because it wasn't in the downtown. It wasn't right in the traditional downtown. And so there's been that focus over time. And I think the biggest thing is for them that they apply the same criteria for fixed asset grant programs where you have a set amount of money and projects are competing against each other. And so it's very appropriate to look at all those projects in that context, to apply criteria, whatever criteria is appropriate to have the highest value for that. And we've kind of said that before. Brownfield is different. Each project generates its own source of revenue. It's not competing against anything. In their draft policy, they used the term competitive 3 times. And that was the opening remark in our conversations and in a lot of conversations. These aren't competitive programs. No project has to compete against each other because it's generating its own source of revenue, which is the base of the incentive. And so that is what I really hope, is that they can separate those 2 evaluation processes. They've merged them all together. Now, just as if they're giving you $1 million, so which you definitely want to make certain that that's going to go and have a project that works and everything is all lined up. But if you approve tax capture for $1 million project, but it doesn't go, there's no harm, no foul, no problem, no issue. You can go on to the next project and approve that one. You don't lose out or anything. So I think that's the thing that we're trying to get them to do. And especially with respect to smaller projects, that's the biggest thing that I want to get through, is just for projects that have what I proposed is $750,000 or less in eligible activities, that you just submit the Activity 1 work plan. Here's the layout. You look at it and approve it. We don't have to go through all of this machination and all these other issues. So I'm a little confident that we'll get some movement that will significantly benefit the smaller projects. We'll probably have to go through the same kind of stuff for the larger projects. So
Mac, what did we do for Liberty Way? I know that when I was building UPHP with Veridia, we had to put in another wall down 30 stories down or something because of some infrastructure, but all that I think kind of went through Brownfield eventually. But they had to put all new utilities up front and everything else, didn't they?
Yeah, there was, as part of that was the improvements to the Lincoln, Washington Street intersection. That was kind of the public improvement component of that project as well. So, that had a public improvement component, but yeah, most of those were, a lot of it was the underground parking, which provided for 4 times the development on that site and paid for itself, pretty quickly. Otherwise, it would have been just the M-Bank building and surface parking. That would have been the alternative. So Yeah, but we had to struggle and fight for that because it wasn't in the downtown. You know, they didn't see it as part of the downtown. So
Okay.
that was a battle for them. So it just has been this kind of evolution of restrictions and restrictions. And kind of the point that I like to make is, you know, I was around when the act was passed in 96, excuse me, and been working with it since 97. And in each amendment to the act, it's expanded the availability. More eligible property. It's not just contaminated property. More eligible activities, non-environmental eligible activities, transformational brownfield plans, you know, transformative areas, targeted redevelopment areas, which allow for multiple things. Land bank authorities, everything is expanded, the accessibility, but MEDC has continually ratcheted down availability of the resources. And I think it's just counter to, I think, legislative intent and interest in the project. So it remains to be seen how intransigent MEDC is, but I think that we've had enough. I mean, I am willing to spend a lot of time in pursuing advocacy for this, you know, either in this process or other processes to get a change in perspective. And I almost think maybe I'll be at that point that they'll be tired of hearing from me and they'll just approve it. Because I think, you know, it also, you know, MEDC is, and it's appropriate, it's heavily invested in downstate. 85% of our gross state product comes from 5 counties downstate, you know, so yeah, a lot of resources should go there. And that's good. That's all fine. But Brownfield TIF is a great tool that anybody can use. And it's one of the few that's available to rural communities. And so I don't understand why you just don't, you know, okay, hey, here's something for you rural folks, you know, you can do your thing.
I think that's another good point for us to use here locally too. I think, you know, some of the skepticism I heard from the library board, I think had a tinge of this, you know, why are you doing it here? You should be using it there. And I think if we could explain, using it here does not reduce our ability to use it there. It works. If you meet certain criteria, it works, and it can be of great benefit at multiple places at once, and you shouldn't see it as a zero-sum game. So,
yeah, and I'll say, I mean, the project priority policy that was established is kind of similar, you know, to what MEDC says. We don't provide, you know, you walk in the door and here's your money. You know, there's an evaluative process that says, you know, for those projects that are outside, that are lower priority projects, we'll provide the environmental and the lead and asbestos abatement and demolition, the kind of diseconomies on a site, you know, but we're not going to go to that next level and provide site preparation or, you know, special foundations or other kinds of things. So we'll help you, you know, clear your site for to make, you know, to be able to deal with the diseconomies on the site. And so you know, and the authority has turned down a couple of projects, you know, that didn't quite meet the criteria. So it's not unheard of. It's not an entitlement program,
right?
But it is, you know, something that demands a little bit more flexibility, I think, to look at because of that reason, is that it's not a fixed pie that has to be divided up. You're generating a new pie every time.
You think the governor's new rural health policy director cabinet position will help?
Yeah, you know, I just read that yesterday, and I think that might be an opportunity or an avenue to move in, because it was kind of acknowledged in that press release that, you know, there aren't a whole lot of resources for rural communities and a need to do it. So I think that's kind of a new thing that popped up yesterday. It's a great idea, Dennis, to work through that avenue as well. We're trying to do this at a staff level now. You know, to work with MEDC staff to try and shape this guideline and policy. They originally proposed that they were going to go to the board in February, but after the feedback they got, and we sort of said, hey, there's no real hurry on this. You know, let's try and take some time and see if we can reach some consensus. So they now have said that they're going to take it in March. So we'll see what happens with the process. And, you know, my approach is that if we don't get a lot of movement, that we get some key folks to come to the strategic fund board in March and express their concern and ask for it to be held off or not adopted or not approved. So It's a interesting and wonderful process.
Thanks. Anything else on that? Any other questions from anybody? All right, so that's project updates. We don't have any unfinished business, so we can move to new business. And the first is the budget allocation for Founders Landing amended Brownfield plan, which Mac has already mentioned. Mac, you want to just go ahead and continue?
Sure,
on that?
I'll try and be more brief than I just was there. So, well, the city's back asking for more money, and that's kind of how things go. But Dennis is here and Mick is here as well. The city engineer, the community development director, Dennis, and Mick, the city engineer, to talk about the situation and kind of working through some of the work with MDOT on US 41. As part of their reconstruction, it was identified that there were some city utilities that were necessary that are the city's responsibilities. And because these infrastructure improvements, directly benefit Founders Landing, they can be included within the plan. And the city is requesting consideration to allocate some of that budget, or allocate that budget and allow for these to be considered as eligible expenditures. As I kind of provided in the note, right now, through all of the processes and incorporating Fairfield and the townhouses in and dealing with the parking deck and the pier, there was about unallocated infrastructure of about $128,000, $127,933. So action would be necessary. I believe would be appropriate by the board to approve this. I think it can be in a motion because it's just a line item adjustment. It doesn't need to be a whole, or it's an allocation of unallocated resources. And as I mentioned in there, there's, the cost is about 235,000. We only have 127,000. So kind of allocate that 127,000. And this is that same approach. We don't know the final costs for Marquette Place. There may be some available budget under Marquette Place. There may be some available budget under the pier as well. That I think that was allocated at 6.4. The recent engineers' estimates were 5.7, but we left that value there. So what I'm kind of suggesting as we have these costs or these proposals or requests that are over our existing budget is that those be approved as eligible or considered and approved as eligible activities. And then in a couple of years, when all the expenses are completed, we can take a look at where that budget value is and see if these projects can fit into that budget value, to that budget level. If there's not available budget, then there's an option to amend the plan, much like we did on DLP for McClelland Avenue, to increase the local tax capture. State ain't going to give us no more money. I mean, we're lucky here. This is about a $39 million, I think, eligible activities we've got state approval for. So we're not going to be able to go back to the state. But for those smaller costs, those could be amended at that time. So approve those costs now, and then look in a couple of years when all the expenses are done and see whether there's budget, or at that time amend the plan to increase the budget, is what I'm suggesting. Maybe Dennis and or Mick can talk a little bit about the project and kind of what is there. The cost estimates are included, but
one quick question before we go to that, Mac. The way it's written here, you're looking for us to approve just the allocation of 128. Would we at the same time be approving the full amount as that it could be put under in the future, or do we just leave that we're not talking about the 234 yet? We're just talking about the 127 today.
Yeah, no, as I think it probably would have been helpful for me to have that amended or changed to approve the allocation, but also approve the full expense pending available budget or an amendment to the Brownfield plan.
So maybe slightly different wording than we have written here. We would be looking to approve the full 234,646 and then apply the 127,933 that's available now, and then come back to the rest of it later.
Yes,
that
would be appropriate, and that's how it should have been written. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Good. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. Great point.
So now, if we want to go to Sean and Mike and Dennis,
Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and kind of ask for your assistance. The way these projects run with MDOT is when they tear up their roads, that's the time that we have to do infrastructure. And in most cases, those are done outside of eligible areas. And then we have to take money that would normally go to capital improvements programming for your neighborhood streets and infrastructure and put it into the larger picture on the MDOT jurisdictional roads, because those utilities need replacing over time. So, you know, when we had this come down, Mick and I collaborated a little bit and thought we wouldn't hurt to speak to Mac and Sherry, and they were very helpful in getting us before the board here to do this. We asked for your consideration because it's, you know, as it stands right now, it'd pay for half the project, and that's $120,000 plus that can go back into capital improvements for all the streets and infrastructure in the actual Marquette proper in those neighborhoods and stuff. I've got, that's all I really have. Mick is here to, you know, answer any technical questions that you may have about the budget costs or timelines or anything like that.
Anybody have questions? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion along these. We can have more discussion after the motion as well, but looking for a motion to approve the estimated cost for the city infrastructure of $234,646.25 and an allocation of contingency in the amount of $127,933 for US 41 infrastructure expenses by the city of Marquette for reimbursement from Brownfield TIF under the Founders Landing Brownfield plan. And if someone's willing to make that motion, Dennis?
Can I just insert one thing, David?
Yes, go ahead, Mac.
After, you know, just for the approval of for the full amount, it might be good to insert something of pending available budget allocation, future budget allocation, or Brownfield plan amendment.
Right. Sherry, did you get that?
More or less, yep. I'll
okay, well,
work
we
with it.
can, let's make sure we look at the actual wording in the minutes as well. So we have, but that, yeah, so what we're doing is we're approving the estimated cost of the 234,000 subject to available funds in the total budget plan in the future, which we'll come back to that, but we're approving that amount as a legitimate amount. And then specifically approving the 128,000 right now that is available currently to go towards this cost. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's the motion that Dennis has made, right, Dennis?
Yes, it is.
So now looking for a second. Matt, thank you. Any further discussion, questions before we vote on this?
Just when is this scheduled to happen?
The project is scheduled for the summer of 2022.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor, say yes or raise your hand. Yes. All opposed? Okay, that passes.
Thank you very much. I
Thanks,
apologize for not having
Dennis
the
and
big
Mick.
motion in there, but good catch, David.
Yeah.
Hey,
Good.
thank you very much. That's really, really appreciated. That's money that's going to be well served in our heavy maintenance projects. Thank you.
So Dennis, will you have to go and beg to Mary to get this money, or will she just send it to you as you ask for it?
I'm just going to go around Mary and go right to Gary.
Oh,
Sorry, Mary.
Channels, man, channels.
All right, thank you. So next we have the 2021 to 2023 strategic plan, city strategic plan. I don't know who we want to have introduce this. Is it Mac or is that Sean or is it?
Yeah, I think it's Sean.
Yeah, that's
Sean?
me.
I think it's Sean. Yep.
Yeah, so I sent out an email last week. I'm not sure everybody got it or not, but basically the city is restarting its strategic planning process. And as part of this, we're seeking participation from all the boards and committees the city has. So basically what I'm looking for today is 3 projects or big ideas that you guys want to include in the strategic plan. They have to be related to the goals in the city master plan. And that's about it. I don't know how
Well, I have an initial thought.
Go ahead.
I have an initial thought, and of course, I haven't talked to anyone else on the board, so it's just my own idea. But and I don't know if this, I don't know how many specifics you need or how well this fits into the different parts of the strategic plan. I did look through it all, but I do think that the place that I am most interested in this time frame that you're talking about, trying to get some brownfield attention and momentum, even if it requires some more outreach, even if it requires using our revolving fund, and I don't know all the specifics about it yet, has to do with the old hospital site. And I think of all the places in Marquette where brownfield could make a huge difference between a future that is bad and a future that is good, it's that neighborhood. Because if nothing happens there, that's eventually going to become harder and harder to get momentum, and could, very quickly become the kind of place you don't want to see in a town that becomes sort of a blighted neighborhood. And I know we've had some momentum at times. I know that there have been discussions between developers and the hospital owners that didn't pan out, but I don't want to give up on that. And I don't know exactly what it is that we can do, but I would really like to find a way to get our attention on that, get the city's attention on that, and see if there's not some way, and it probably involves things beyond brownfield, but find a way for brownfield to participate in a proactive way to get something going there. And that's something I'm hoping will include this missing middle housing that keeps being discussed. And, Dennis's stuff is well-timed as well that's coming out about that. So again, I don't have a really detailed plan of action, except to say, I think brownfield's part of the mix. I think that missing middle housing is part of the mix. I think it's clearly in the interest of the overall planning of the city and the brownfield to try to really put some attention to this and not just wait for, somebody to, wait for a developer to decide it's time. I know we have to find a developer, but anyway, that's a place where I would propose that we consider making this one of our 3 maybe places that we suggest to the city that we'd like to see some focus from the brownfield side. That's my 2 cents.
I would support that. I think that one of the things we did talk at significantly at the ad hoc group was where's space going to be, how we're going to do it. And you probably saw that in some of the draft, and you'll see the finals when it gets done. But I think there was concern about that whole several square block area of what are we going to do with that? How's it going to get rechanged and how's it going to be done? And I think that making this as one of the major projects, whatever we're going to call it, would be a good move forward. At least get some additional focus on it, where the spotlight really is going to be on that area. Because we've looked at things like, obviously, the Dow development and all those kind of things as a bet. But I think if we don't do something, that big square in the middle of the city, as David said, it's going to be a mess. And all around there, the values are going to start dropping. And it's just going to get one thing after another. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
I agree. I think that there's a lot of value in that site with it being positioned between the university and downtown. I think it's a really strategic place for missing middle housing, and it can also serve the student population as well.
Matt and Rob, do you have any thoughts about that particular idea? Does it seem like something worth our time and effort in this context?
I think it's, like you said, David, prime candidate for brownfield funding, and whatever the city can do to encourage developers to come in. I think we play an important role in that.
Okay, so Sean, that's one. Is this conversation what you're looking for? Or do you need something further from us, or is this?
I'm going to take this conversation, and I don't know if you guys saw that that sheet that I attached to the email. but I was going to take that and write it up as a priority. So
Great. Anyone else have other ideas for Sean that we might want him to consider?
I'd like to see, I don't know how it would happen, but that sidewalk along Wright Street, I think the connectivity from the new roundabout by NMU to the Dow development is just not good. The sidewalk sucks, and there's constantly people on the road, trying to walk down Wright Street. I see a lot of students and others, either on the bikes or on foot coming down Wright Street, and it's not safe. And I also I think it's a strategic spot to have an artery for foot and pedestrian traffic and bike traffic. I think it would make sense, if it could be done, to try to get more of a bike path-esque corridor there, like where the sidewalk is, or like I said, I don't know how we get done. But I think the city should look at and try to prioritize some connectivity between all the way from the Cliffs Dow development, down Wright Street, through the new traffic circle at Northern, past the new city building, and then try to get it to where the bike path crosses Wright Street, past the NMU soccer fields. And maybe that could be somehow added to a brownfield project in the community development portion of it. If there were some funds we could shift over to help get that done, I would support that. I think it's a missing piece in the city's plans for greenway connectivity and foot, pedestrian and bike traffic.
I'll just jump in. Maybe it's appropriate. I mean, Cliffs Dow is another major site if that kind of moves forward, in terms of that redevelopment, and then include the connectivity as part of that component, to say, because if Cliffs Dow kind of evolves and gets going, that's going to be a pretty big project. But maybe that's the bigger project, and then include the importance of connectivity, and then spend some time talking about that example, of where that may go, and making all of those connections. Generally, that might be an option for one of the.
I was going to say any reworking of that area is probably going to be related to the redevelopment of the Cliffs Dow site.
Yeah, we probably include that as an infrastructure component in the Brownfield plan, as well. So if that evolves.
I certainly support that idea of, as something happens at Cliffs Dow, I think it's likely something's going to happen there that's very likely to include Brownfield. And I think having this component be part of it certainly makes sense. And I think it also makes sense in terms of strategic planning. Other reactions to that from people on the board?
I think that makes a good idea from what Rob said and what Max said, to kind of develop that whole thing with a bigger holistic approach to things.
I see it not good. So Sean, that's a second idea. I don't, again, I'm not exactly sure how this fits into your strategic planning process. And maybe this one's a little more specific to Brownfield.
I do think we're kind of looking for more of like a big idea, like broader concepts here, I guess, like, using Brownfield to support redevelopment in general, not necessarily like small, like concentrated priorities like that.
Well, how about this?
Brownfield could be part of like a Brownfield plan in the future for sure. It's just that this is, as a strategic plan, bigger ideas.
Yeah, well, so how about this to make it fit into the bigger idea? This would be a component of the bigger idea. The bigger idea could be looking for ways for the city and Brownfield to keep front and center in our thinking connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, and green space connectivity that connects different parts of the city. An example of which might be this corridor on Wright Street that could be attached to Cliffs Dow. But the bigger picture is, just like we saw there in the early discussions about the Veridia's not proposals, but their ideas for the hospital site. One of their ideas was that same thing, connectivity between the campus and the bike paths, and making that be a big part of their plans. So that, again, that would be another example of this big idea of let's make the city more connected, especially for pedestrians and bikes, that we're looking for ways to do that.
Go ahead. Well, the only other thing I thought of was many years ago, there was the DDA did a study and for a parking structure down behind the old Wells Fargo building, which Flagstar now, whatever. I was thinking of some way of making that whole 2 or 3 area block more pedestrian friendly, no vehicles. So, and then, but the problem is getting parking. So if we built that parking structure, so to speak, that DDA had in mind behind Donkers, behind that whole area there, and make that a parking structure, we could close off Washington Street basically from the library all the way through. And it's much more, and as David said, you know, we can make like a green space in the middle. And so it's more parks, or it's one of those walking things. And so, you know, you come out of the stores and you've either got park benches, or you've got more spacing, or you got a promenade, or you've got, so you have 2 or 3 continuous blocks that are, you don't need a car. You can either have a bike, you can walk, you can do whatever. And that's one of the things we worked on is bike paths and bike lanes and things. And then the DDA or somebody came up with a center thing where you go up 3 or 4 stories to make buildings in the city off 3rd Street. And so I just think that whole concept of making that a little bit more walkable, less commuters, less cars, you know, a better little, maybe a better green footprint, so to speak, whatever that term has to be.
So maybe that's 2 different specific ideas that fit under this umbrella idea of green space and pedestrian friendly connectivity. And then, you know, if people want examples, a couple examples are the Wright Street connectivity, this one that Dennis just mentioned, building this idea into sort of the city's vision and the Brownfield Authority's vision of what we might be able to do with some of our projects.
Yeah, I would say I'll include that, as I mentioned, underneath the second priority.
Yeah, great. Anybody else? Other ideas? That's 2. That's pretty good. So.
Is there a way that we can just kind of like build on the momentum of what's already here? For instance, like encouraging the construction of sustainable, energy efficient homes and buildings is a recommended topic under green housing. Is there a way that we can kind of incorporate that into our work or our reviews? You know, things like that we can kind of like help the city tick away at as development occurs.
Does the Brownfield Board really have a lot of involvement with that, though? That's my question.
Matt, what do you think?
Planning goals are specifically around like what the Brownfield does and, you know, the priorities you have.
Yeah, I think the, you know, there are a couple of changes that have been made in eligible activities that provide for low impact stormwater management, for example. You know, not necessarily in, you know, energy efficient buildings or alternative energy. I do sense that may end up becoming an eligible activity sometime soon. But right now, there are some opportunities to have green roofs or other, you know, rain gardens, other low impact stormwater management that kind of fit into a sustainable approach, you know, there. I think maybe with that perspective, Callie, it might be that if there is a broader sustainability priority for the city, if that kind of comes out of encouraging that, you know, utilizing brownfield fundings to advance that, you know, as applicable, might be an opportunity, and also for the board to look at projects that, you know, may have that as well, maybe an option.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like in the you know, the example that Sean provided is, you know, really all about transportation and connectivity, you know, and that may be able to be just plugged in. And, you know, that's probably where Brownfield is it can plug in a whole bunch of different areas to help support, you know, those broader initiatives. Probably, you know, workforce housing is another one. I would imagine that'll be a strategic priority of the board. And that there is a role for the Brownfield Authority to play in supporting workforce housing. by reimbursement of some eligible activities that bring down the cost of housing. So that may be an option, you know, if it's not the sole standalone idea, maybe to infuse brownfield funding or opportunities within, you know, any appropriate strategic priority.
Right.
You know,
All
to
right.
trigger off of Callie's idea about housing, I would say that one of the things that we talked about at length during the ad hoc thing was the workforce housing, the middle housing, whatever we want to call that. And part of it was to loosen up as people move from low income housing and get into the middle housing, because some people are still stuck in low income housing, not that they need to, because it's cheaper to live there. So if they go into middle, they'll take some of this backlog out of low income. And the other aspect is if we focus on that, funding that kind of stuff with green impact, I think it'll, like Max said, it makes a difference, because the bigger picture that kind of rolled out, and Dennis is still on, maybe he can jump in and remember some things, but part of the issues that popped up with some low density housing is water. You know, the increased water that's going to be collected, nowhere to go. It's going to go down the San, you know, and then we end up like Houston did, where they have all these massive floods all the time because you can't get rid of it. And then how do you get rid of it? Well, that's very important, I think, as they design those higher density areas on small spaces. How do you get that water out of there and not just have all concrete all over the place?
And that's certainly an area where Brownfield could come in for some more innovative approaches for stormwater management, low impact, you know, rain gardens, and manage those and provide some reimbursement for those costs.
If I could just chime in for a second, since I'm here,
Yeah.
and find it kind of helpful, because I'm actually the guy in the hot seat leading the strategic planning process for the city. I think what I'm hearing you say a lot with every individual project you're talking about is you would like to use Brownfield to continue to support city initiatives that are like found in the master plan of our walkability and things along those lines. For me, in the process and communicating with the city commission, I think it's a lot better if that's more of a broader statement. Rather than getting into, we'd like to use it for this particular project. You can kind of identify those projects with certain keywords. The hospital one is a very legitimate one. That's really good. You know, continue to use Brownfield funding to support any partnerships or policies that the city's going to pursue with that. And along the same lines, you could use the walkability thing. That would be my recommendation, to kind of keep it at that level, because then it allows you as a board to be a little bit more flexible, because technically when you go into the strategic planning process and you pick a project, if you narrow it down to that one project, by the state statute, we have to budget for that one project on my end when we go through the actual budgeting process. So in some terms, broader is a little bit better, if you're following me.
Yep. And so on these last two ideas, you know, we said on the middle one, the walkability, that's keep that general. We won't talk about all the specifics, but on this last one, as you just mentioned, I mean, I think what we're looking to do is use Brownfield as one of the catalysts to help the city achieve some of these broad missions that they have, and that we certainly see the opportunities to help the city in many ways catalyze their broad agenda.
Yeah, and I think Sean and I can kind of help you craft those. And you know, you're talking about water infrastructure, you know, that would be continue to support policies and programs that it would be new low impact development to support, you know, increase. Well, we're not using the term density anymore. This is really important. I have to tell folks about this. We had a really great national housing guy talk to us at the ad hoc housing committee, and he said, don't use the term density anymore because it scares people. And he's absolutely right. So now we're calling it maximum development efficiency. or something along those lines, right? But you get where I'm leading with that. Use the program to support low impact development, and in turn would allow for more maximum development efficiency or something along those lines.
I think what might be an opportunity looking at the structure of those is the overall strategic priority is to utilize brownfields to support city initiatives. And then we can click off what those, opportunities might be in terms of supporting workforce housing, supporting low impact stormwater management, supporting connectivity. So the priority is supporting the city, and then
that's
kind of
actually perfect. That would be extremely helpful to do it like that, because then you have a list that the city commission could kind of pick off from. And as administrators, if we're going to spend money on something or recommend budget, we can go back and say, look, we got the brownfield support for this project. It's in their wheelhouse. We can check that box and move forward with it. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you guys are doing a real good job of identifying. That's kind of how UP State Bank came up. We talked about UP State Bank, and Dennis said, hey, and city engineering said, hey, we've got a problem here with the water main. Can we utilize that? So I think that's a good, collaborative approach, and we can sort of identify that as continue to collaborate with the city to meet city strategic priorities, and then kind of identify how we might be able to do that in that one sheet.
So Sean, feel free to, if you want additional input. I mean, if you have what you need, great. If you want any further input, feel free to, if you want us to look at anything further, or if you want Mac to look at anything further, or whatever. If you want any help with any language or anything, we're happy to help. If you have what you need, that's great. I think it's
just to review. I think I kind of have two at the moment. One is the old hospital site, then the other would be utilize brownfield to support city initiatives, and then talk about walkability and sustainability underneath that.
Perfect. Everybody okay with that? Everybody good? Good. Yep. Good. That sounds good. Okay. If
By
there's
all
no further,
means, I'm not trying to guide you one way or another to be the staff guy that steps in and says you can't do this or you should do that, but I just thought I'd, kind of explain it to you that explain to you what really helps me when it comes time to doing the budget.
Right. Thank you very much. Good. So we can move on to, unless there's any other discussion here, we'll move on to Mac Consulting Services invoices. Always our favorite part of the meeting. And we have
late in the day. Maybe we should bump this back till next month or something.
Yeah, I think we already. It is after 9 already.
Yeah, it's gone a long time. So,
so we have. Looks like we have 4 invoices that total $5,970, and so I'm looking for a motion to approve those 4 invoices totaling that amount. Matt. Looking for a second. Dennis, thank you. Any discussion, questions? All in favor, say yes or
yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. That motion passes. That brings us to the second public comment. I assume we still have no one new online. Is that right?
Hey, Dave.
Excuse me, David, I just wanted to point out there is a second invoice, and I split them up because the other invoices were for the previous year, so they're separate.
Okay, sorry about that. Yep.
Dave, I move that we approve payment of the $5,070 set of 3 invoices for January, or dated January 2nd.
That's a new motion. Looking for a second. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. That passes.
Who seconded, please?
I did.
Matt.
Dennis? Okay.
Oh,
Thanks.
okay. Well, we may have 2 seconds then.
thank you.
So do we still need a second one now for the other one? Or are we?
No, we did both.
All right, good.
Yes, you did do both.
Sorry for the confusion. Now we're ready for the second set of public comments, and I assume we have nobody on the line. So no public comments. Great. And now we're ready for comments from the Brownfield directors. I'll just go around the screen as usual. Rob, do you have anything?
Nope. Happy 2021, guys. Nothing
Thank
new.
you. Matt?
Not,
Okay. Callie
No, thank you. Good to see everyone.
and Dennis?
The only thing I would say is, I've sent those things out, like David said, the drafts for the ad hoc stuff. I sent a subsequent one to Sherry, which was our second draft, and that we have a working board meeting, I think February 3rd with the city commission, which we do a little bit deeper dive presentation. But I think great thanks go to both Sean and Dennis and Evan, who kind of chaired the committee to kind of keep it on track and get a lot of these innovative folks to come in and talk to us. We had a lot of different ideas. We really came up with a lot of barriers that we have, that the city will have to deal with over time. But it was kind of fun, I think, as we kind of floated through how to get more people in the city, and then wrestled with the question, is it just people that are going to be here to live, to pay taxes, or is it going to be people that are going to rent? But I think, we kind of went from one end of the spectrum to the other, but we kind of did a very broad fish catch, so to speak, and got a lot of different ideas in there. And I think that after we meet with the city, I think we're going to continue to go on for a few more months, another 6 months maybe, to kind of get some things more finite. But it was an interesting process, and I didn't really have a whole lot of faith the first meeting and a half, just because it was so many different stockholders, so in their stakeholders in the process. But it kind of all smoothed off as we got different ideas of people to come through, and different things they did, from taking buildings like the old Chippewa Square and just kind of redeveloping that into apartments, as opposed to ripping them down or just doing offices, or taking abandoned buildings. And where we look at now, it's very trendy to see, well, we're going to redo that and make it a lot of high-end condos. Well, it might be easier to kind of redo those and make a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, so that you get more young people downstate, or people supporting the university or whatever. And so it kind of ties in with the whole old hospital stuff. Although that's very difficult because it's all terrazzo floors and all that kind of junk. But I think it was an interesting process, and hope you guys enjoyed what you saw and some of the data that we were able to gather and push out. And there was a ton of stuff that I didn't send out, just because some of it was, 150 pages and junk like that. So it was just tough.
And by the way, Sherry, when you forwarded that second email, I don't think the attachment was, at least on mine, there was no attachment. I think you forgot to hit include attachment.
Oh, I apologize. I'll make sure you have that. I did
Okay.
want to mention that because Mac and I have had numerous conversations with some of the individuals that are going to be presenting and being involved at the city work session. We will be participating in that as well.
Good.
On the 3rd.
Great. Well, thanks for all that effort, Dennis. We really appreciate it, and appreciate getting the updates. So, okay, well, unless there's anything else, I think we can be adjourned.
Thanks.
All right.
See you guys.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.